Hi everybody, Chris here from Truly Holistic. In this video we're going to talk about some new information that is pieced together, something that, we've all been through in one form or another over the last 4 years. And it's going to bring a lot of realization, a lot of revelation in regards to piecing it together, giving us greater insight into what it really was all about. And for the sakes of this video, I'm going to call it the sun microbe, okay? But I'm pretty sure you get what I mean by that, right? Okay. So when we looked at this pandemic by the sun microbe, as you hear those two words, right, sun microbe, and you know what I mean by that word that starts with C, not with the V in it, but what it was originally a strain of, okay, which is, the definition of that is actually a gaseous envelope of the sun, right? The word that starts with C and starts with A, ends with A, right? Hence why I'm saying sun microbe, right? And the Latin word for sun, right, the very ancient Latin meaning word for sun is S-O-L, but pronounced like S-O-U-L, soul. I'm a real big believer in everything holding and having purpose. Okay. A lot of the things that we take from the ancients in this modern time is a perspective. And it might not be exactly the same perspective how the ancients saw it. So hence, we could be misinterpreting the information or the wisdom that they are enabling us to have. Perspective's everything, right? So when we really need to dig into what something means, the definition of insight, right? To have greater understanding and knowing of what something represents, what we're observing, what we're experiencing. Because humans are generally a species that follows what they see, and then they enable a thought process to think it through. Now, with the issue with those two things is that our eyes and thought is actually very limiting things that are not enabling us that greater insight, right? To have a greater understanding of what's going on, what we're experiencing, what we're observing. Okay, and that's on purpose as well. Okay, because what we see with these duality eyes, right, a duo, two, is less than 0.0035% of the electromagnetic spectrum of light. So really, with that information, we should be saying we should not follow what we see. We shouldn't trust in what we see. Okay, because it's not even one piece of a puzzle of putting together a puzzle, or you're looking through a keyhole in regards to understanding the bigger picture. So we can't trust what we see. And then thought, right, is the extension of the mind. And what the mind is like a doorway. The mind and the heart are what we call space bridges, right, which are another word for calling a wormhole, a stargate, right? Physicists, quantum physicists, they call a wormhole an Einstein-Rosen bridge, right? So it's a space bridge. Door 1, door 2, if you want to look at that. Door 1, door 2. And it's there to facilitate or create an access for intelligence to utilize the interface. And the interface here is the body, the vessel. Okay, right? To convert formless energy into a formed creation. Okay. Now, behind door one, the heart, there's more of you as an infinite consciousness. That's where your soul comes from, is the heart. This is your center of neutrality, and neutrality means balance. Okay. The mind is the center of duality, and duality means unbalance. Okay. Because as the human, right, following what we see, using a thought process, that is playing down the pathway of mind thought. Part of this, not heart feel this. Okay. We have this open, enables more of you as infinite consciousness. When this is open instead of this, right, then it strips away your authenticity. You become your conditioning, what you've been taught to be as the human, with all its limiting factors, as I just mentioned before. Okay. And as one door opens, the other closes. So if we're more up here and the mind's opening, the door of the heart closes. If we're in the heart, that opens, and then the door of the mind closes. They can never both be fully open. Okay, they are vying for access for this vessel, right? Which is an interface, because the intelligence that comes through the mind, the intelligence that comes through the pathway of the heart, is extending its will through the body. That's why it's called an interface. And that's why quite often you'll hear people say, you're a medium, you're a conduit, you know, to extend its message, its guidance, direction through, right? And then you're here as the creative force, right, to transform that formless energy into a formed creation, okay? So, interesting thing about that word, right? Sun microbe. So, that word, that C-A, right? And again, I know it's a little bit cryptic here, but I can't say the words, right? Because then all of a sudden they'll be on me for something. So, now, a tool that we use regularly here at Truly Holistic, you know where I'm going here, right? Is this tool called the Sunray. Obviously reasons, right? It's a symbology of the sun. You know? How, as a child, innocent child, how do we draw the sun? How are they taught to draw the sun? Like that, right? There's been much symbology of the sun over the years. And I really recommend you looking at my other YouTube video on my YouTube channel talking about sun worshipping and how it's the origin of every cultural, religious thing that is followed now as part of humanity. I really encourage you to check that out. And it shows more symbology in regards to the sun. But this is more of a current presentation of it, right? And when we use this tool in a session with clients, is when we need to bring forth that person's soul, their consciousness, their infinite consciousness, which is brought through and represented through a pathway, a quantum pathway of the heart. Because I say, the heart from what we perceive as physical reality, which is, as I say, a limitation, we see that as probably the most important muscle of the body. But there's so much more to what the heart is bringing, right? This is why it's a beating organ. It has a rhythm and a rate to it. It's a vortex. And vortex is a geometry of flow. It's a passage, and vortex is also a geometry of a wormhole, portal, stargate. Right? So when we use this tool with clients, we are bringing forth more of that capacity of themselves. Not the human, not the conditioning that has been ushered into the human through the mind pathway, but your authenticity that comes from the heart, soul. Right? So there's already a connection there with the sun and your soul, right? And we quite often use the perspective of that, right? If we use a human perspective, and the human perspective is to externalize everything, okay? And when we use a human perspective, and I go to someone with a human perspective, and I go, you being a human here, what is the greatest light source and energy source that you have here for you being here, for life to be here? And of course the answer is going to be sun. right? Latin word, soul. But if I change that perspective, right, we're still going to ask the same question, but it's just going to be a change of perspective. And it's not going to be a human perspective, it's going to be a consciousness perspective, where that consciousness perspective is no longer about externalizing things, it's about going within. And I ask that person, I go, what's the greatest energy source, your light source, when you go in? Of course, what's the answer going to be? Soul, your soul, right? We just change the perspective from externalizing it to internalizing it. So there's a connection there with that, right? Now, you know, it's the passage of our infinite nature, our energy signature, which is another way of saying soul. Okay, your heart. So this whole pandemic, right, of the sun microbe, is what's been brought forth is this aspect that it's been a challenge. Okay, and I think it's the key word there, challenge, to keep it simple. And that challenge is, as I say, there is two pathways, two forms of intelligence vying to use this vessel to expand their creation. Okay, and I've already explained there of what's behind door one, what we facilitate by allowing our heart to be open, more of ourself as a soul consciousness, infinite consciousness, right? So what's behind this door of the mind? Okay, something that humans embrace and embody as part of themselves, which it's not. Okay. It's like we call ourselves human beings, but look around. Humans don't know how to be. That's the cosmic joke. We should be called human doings. Okay, and doing is something that the mind provides, not the heart. The heart's only interested in a state of being. But a majority of people, it's the most common clearing we do in my sessions with everybody, is to open that person's heart, because they're all up here in the head, in the mind, and thought. Right? Okay. So what comes through here is what you know as artificial intelligence. Okay, this is why we're seeing such a expansion right now in the form of social media, YouTube, algorithms, all these sorts of things, which is AI technology. But it's just facilitating more of that intelligence. And this vessel is being used to enable that. Right? Okay? Now, so this challenge is, right, is whether we're going to live a life, right? Are we going to provide an ascension for ourselves, which the heart is needed, right? Because you're going to present more of yourself as an infinite consciousness to be a representation here. That's ascension for you. Or are you going to close that off and fail your ascension? Because I've always been told by my higher consciousness that the reason why we fail ascension, one word, thought, thinking. Okay, because it enables a pathway that is not you to be represented here, for you to extend its will, it's to fulfill its purpose, for it to ascend and not you. Okay? So the challenge is, you know, what's dominating what here? And for a long time, humanity and humans, really the idea of a human humanity, which I call our conditioned self, is really a makeup or a byproduct of the mind Okay. And as I say, going back to the word human being, what that really means is not a life form, like a lot of people go, oh, being's a life form. No, what it really means is, what it's trying to accomplish is the human providing a state of being, because being is a state we provide, an environment we provide. And what we come to find is a state and environment is the precursor of how something behaves. It's how something implements a practice, right? Ascension. Okay? And being is done through presence, awareness, feel, not thought. Okay? Thought puts us into doing. And you look at really the way that we go about a number of things in our life, including when we have health problems. Generally, we do a lot, right? We take pharmaceutical, we take supplement, we've got to change your diet, do. But where we lack is providing that state that actually enables and allows healing to happen in the first place, which is our ability to provide a state of being. Okay? Right? So that's the challenge at the moment, because humans are creating what we call duality existence, and duality is based on an energy that is non-compatible to our authenticity as a soul, as a consciousness, which is the characteristics is chaotic, not harmonious energy, and conflicting, right? No wonder these conflict, like natural disasters happening everywhere, and these wars and those sorts of things, they're built on a state that is providing conflict. Why is there conflict outside of us? Because there are millions and billions of humans, right, which is not your true authentic identity, conflicted within you, and then you project that out. Okay, so that's what's going on there, right? So this is why this challenge was presented, right, as enabling people the chance to switch from here into here and start to provide a state of neutrality, right, balance, that is more to do with compatible field, harmonious field, peaceful field, not conflicted and chaotic, right, and unbalanced like duality is, right? So obviously there's been so much fear that's come from this pandemic, right? And when we really look into, as a human, and humanity's greatest fear, and it's death, it's dying. Why? Because we've invested so much in our physicality that when this physical, or this vessel, this time we have in this vessel, has expired, we don't know what's next, and we're fearful of that. Which means that we've completely invested into our conditioned version of ourselves, what we've been taught to be as the human, and we know nothing about our authenticity as a soul, as a consciousness, as an infinite consciousness. Okay. So as I say, right, sun microbe, okay? So as I mentioned about that word that starts with C and starts with A, right, which is this microbe that is got a V in the middle of it. It's a strain of this microbe that's C and then an A on it, which is connected to the sun, right? It's the gaseous envelope of the sun. And as I mentioned before, the sun, Latin name is soul, right? Connected to your soul. Right? Now let's look at the second part, right? The microbe aspect. And we know the type of microbe it is, right? Starts with the letter V, okay? Ends with S. Now when I looked at, definitions of that word, starting with V, ending with S, there was one in particular that really connected with this perspective, right? To give us greater insight. And it was this, that it's a harmful or corrupting influence. Okay. Now, as I talked about, right, there is two pathways, mind, heart, more of your authenticity as a soul coming through here, AI facilitation through here, right, a vine for this vessel to extend their will, right, expand their creation here. Now, the story, the arc of the human, which becomes our conditioned self, what we don't want to be, we want to be our authentic self, you could say is the corruption. Because it's corrupt, it's conditioning us, programming us to be something that we're not. corrupting us. It's corruption, right? So when I say that, this microbe that starts with V, ends with S, it's the mind itself that is that. Okay, right? Now, as I said about the two words human being, and I talked about the true perspective, the true insights in the way we look at that. Now, I'm going to throw you another one that's connected to the mind, right? And that is mind control. Okay. And the human perspective is the thing, okay, we have a mind. It's my mind, I embody that. That's my mind, okay? And that if anybody uses technology or using all sorts of ways, someone can control my mind, which hence we call it mind control. But when we look deeply into what the characteristics that the mind provides, right? The intelligence that's facilitated through the mind, because as I say, the mind is that portal that is enabling that AI intelligence access here, right? Okay, as I say, chaos, right? Conflict, okay? Control. Okay. The mind only knows control. Do you know what the heart knows what to do? To surrender. The opposite. The heart doesn't know how to control at all. It only knows how to surrender. The mind doesn't know how to surrender. All it knows is to control, right? So if we are accessing the mind and facilitating everything that comes through it more than we have here, right? That's closing off, that's opening. We will then become a byproduct of that, and a lot of our behavior will be controlling too. So instead of seeing that, okay, we have a mind and someone, again, what's the human perspective? We externalize everything, right? Throw that away and realize that mind control is the fact that when we utilize the mind only knows control. So the mind control is the mind itself. The usage and the facilitation of the mind itself. And it's not your fault, not because we never got taught this, right? The curriculum of the 101 of being the human was to embrace the mind. It's part of the controlling. It's part of the manipulation. Part of the perception deception. Right? So we've looked at, sun micro, right? And the first word sun is about here, your authenticity, this pathway here. And the second word is about the other pathway up here, right? So, heart, mind. And that is the challenge of what we knew as the pandemic with the sun microbe. Okay? See, we're going right back to the basics, the root of it. Okay, the greater insight of that. Because the thing is, to fully understand reality, and you need to do that to ascend, by the way. And I'm a reality coach, not a life coach. Life coach is about dealing with duality problems. Reality coach is about ascending above duality into neutrality, which is about empowering and enlightenment. Okay, it's not about the old paradigm of being vulnerable, being a victim to outside influence. It's about stepping in your own light, in your own power. And how you do that is being more self-aware of what you provide and what you bring forth. Okay? Because what's the human perspective? To be more aware of what's outside of you. But the problem with that, you lose your self-awareness. Therefore, you lose your ability and your self-awareness of how you create. And a lot of the times, we're forging our energy into the very things that end up sabotaging ourselves. It's part of the game of duality. Okay? So, as I said, right, this vessel, which we call the human body, right, as part of a human perspective, and again, it's part of that physical reality we perceive. And as I say, we only perceive it with such a sliver of the bandwidth of frequency, right? Less than 0.0035% the electromagnetic spectrum of light. We can no longer follow that because it's going to deceive us. Thought and the mind is going to deceive us. So what do we then invest in? What do we rely on? Feel. Feel is what connects you to your expansion that spans over a multiverse, multi-realities, multi-dimensional. Right? Who's had a situation where, you know, you wake up in the morning and you've got an ache and pain somewhere and you're thinking, well, why have I got that? I haven't done vigorous exercise or played a physical sport or something like that would cause that to be so painful. Or now, what's happening there is you're feeling not something that you've done, but a version of you that exists in another reality, that you are connected through quantum entanglement because you share the same energy signature. That's what you're feeling there. And this gets into the whole aspect of what symptoms are, right? Because generally, as the human, we know more about what's happening on the other side of the world, something we probably won't experience with our own eyes right in front of us. We know more about that than we know about things that we experience from moment to moment every day. For example, understanding what our relationship with our own body, what symptoms really are, what are thoughts. If you just went to somebody on the side of the street and asked about those things, they wouldn't know. These are things that you're in this vessel for a good 70, 80, 90, 100 years if you're lucky. So you should know it. You should have a great relationship with it. You get symptoms every day in some form or another. You should know what they represent. Majority of people have a lot of thought forms coming through. You should know where they come from, what they are. Why you don't know what they are? Because you've been conditioned to shine your torch one way, so therefore you won't learn about that stuff. Okay? That's the mind. That's the mind control. Okay? Again, investing fully in your physicality. Right? So therefore, you'll always be in a state of fear, especially in regards to what's next for you. So, I hope you really enjoyed this video. We'll end it there because I can talk about this for a very long time. But I hope you really enjoyed this video and it's given you some greater insight. And a lot of my work here is I like to keep things simple and simplify things, because as we get to the origin or root of things, and that's kind of my mantra in regards to what I provide at Truly Holistic, is that simplicity, because the heart only knows simplicity. The mind knows complexity. That's why generally as the human we do jump over what is actually there. The answers are there, but we just jump over, or we overcomplicate the process. We make things too complex. When you think about it, right, when we're overwhelmed and stressed, which is connected to every illness and health problem there is, that comes out of living out of a state of complexity, which is there, not simplicity. We need to be here. Okay? Right? All the creation that's happened into this world is because we've been conflicted and complicated within, and hence we project that out. Once we get back in the heart, get back into simplicity, we can start to turn this world around and create a construct outside of ourselves, right? This formless energy gets transformed into matter, physical reality, that then reflects our heart's desires, instead of the worries, the fears, the concerns that come from here. So it's all about simplicity. It's all about, when we get to the origin root, it should be that way, right? We get rid of all the superficial nonsense that's trying to veer you off track, and we just get back to the basics. That's how we get it. Ascension is about that. It's about simplicity. It's about allowing the heart to lead your life, right? That everything will be in the highest good for you. That's what Ascension's all about, because you need to be a representation of what you authentically are here as an infinite consciousness, right? That then will present the greater insights and the wisdom to know what you're observing and experiencing, and also your own gifts and talents as a creative force, creating a reality that becomes a reflection of your heart's desires instead of the worries, concerns, and fears that the mind presents. If you've enjoyed this video, like the video, please consider subscribing to the video. I've got over 400 videos on here talking about a lot of this types of information. Obviously, Ascension right at the top as a priority. I'd love to hear your comments below about this topic. Until next time, catch you later.